You've spelunked into the Matt Cave.
Hello, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, and welcome in to the Matt Cave. Thank you so much for spelunking on by. This week, we had everybody win. That's a rare week, or rare weekend, I guess I should say, in the state of Utah, where pretty much everybody won, except for, I think, University of Utah basketball had a rough shooting night, but other than that, everybody won. So it was pretty cool. Much better than a couple of weeks ago where everybody lost. So thank you all so much for being here. I'll break down each game as best I can in the time I have. And please go to those socials, like, comment, subscribe, give those updates, those comments. Everything helps a ton. And please share this with just one person that you think would enjoy the program. It would be awesome if you just, plastered your social media with my stuff, but you don't have to. Just one person that you think would enjoy the program. That would mean a lot to me. And that's pretty much it. Let's dive straight into things here, and let's start with BYU men's basketball. Let's do that. They faced off in Salt Lake City Friday afternoon against the Wisconsin Badgers. And if you will remember, last season, BYU knocked Wisconsin out of the NCAA tournament. It's true. That happened on their way to the Sweet 16. So it was kind of a revenge game for Wisconsin. As much of a revenge game as you can have in this day and age of the transfer portal, NIL, and all that stuff. What blew me away about this game was two things. First, BYU's defense. I did not expect that from a Kevin Young team. Last season, they just outshot opponents, and they couldn't really stop anyone. And if you need a prime example of that, just look at the NCAA tournament run. They just outshot people, and they overwhelmed them. They didn't necessarily play very good defense. And then that came to a head in that final game against Alabama. This season, it was almost kind of the same. Against UConn, they couldn't stop them because Connecticut was kind of built to beat a team like BYU, where they can punish you inside because BYU is massively undersized. Kibakita is only 6'9". I mean, he can jump out of the gym, to be sure, but he's only 6'9". And so they give up a lot of offensive rebounds. They give up just a bunch of size on the inside, and Connecticut was able to exploit that very well. When BYU collapsed down in, Connecticut kicked it out, and they were hitting their threes. Wisconsin is one of the tallest programs in the country. I believe they're 7th tallest team in the country. But that didn't really reflect. BYU out-rebounded Wisconsin by 5. And they didn't turn the ball over a lot. So as you all know, I love Rob Wright. I love his game, but he can be a turnover machine. In this game, he only turned it over twice. And what made it even better is he wasn't a black hole. He wasn't a vacuum for the ball. He would dribble drive, but he would kick it out. He wouldn't just try to force a bad shot. He would kick it out, and guys were hitting threes. Everybody from Tyler Russ to Richie Saunders was hitting threes. I mean, Dawson Baker always hits threes. Even Alexei Kostic was hitting threes. I feel like I'm calling a hockey game with a couple of these names. But this is what BYU's team can be. We've seen how they can struggle and still almost pull off an upset of a national title favorite. So that was really fun to watch. It was in the afternoon at the Delta Center, so not a lot of people were able to watch it. And it was also on Peacock. It wasn't on any sort of television network, so that made it a little bit more difficult. Overall, though, I was very impressed. BYU's defense held Wisconsin to sub 40% shooting percentage and then sub 25% from the three-point line. Are you kidding me? And they only gave up 26 free throws. So this team, when they're locked in, is among the best in the country. They really are. I would say they're a top 5 team. Does that mean they're going to make the Final Four? Absolutely not. Who knows when March Madness hits, but they are pretty much a lock for March Madness, which we haven't really been able to say about a BYU men's basketball team, like ever, except for when they had Jimmer, maybe, and maybe the Yoeli Childs years. But this team is going to go through a grinder. They really are. So the schedule, I mean, I've talked about it a lot. They've got Miami coming up on the 27th of November, and then they have to play against Clemson in December. Other than those two non-conference tilts, they've got a bunch of very winnable games, practice games if you want to call them that. And then even to start the Big 12 season, it's Kansas State, Arizona State, Utah, and TCU. None of those teams are expected to be any good this year. Sorry, Utah fans, but just not. Before they have to travel to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech in January. So the schedule ramps down a little bit, which it can be a little worrying because when you play in those games you are expected to win, you don't have to try as hard. You can just out-talent the other team. So I'll be looking to see how the defense performs. Overall on the season, I mean, BYU's defense has been stellar other than that loss against UConn. They've given up less than 70 points or less in every game except for Connecticut. I'd say that's pretty good. So this team is really good. It's very fun to watch as well. AJ DeBonsa is very coachable. Already through 5 games. In that first game, the ball kind of stopped with him. Now he's not, I don't know if afraid is the right word, but he will pass the ball now. He's not just going to take it to the hoop himself. And so this team can be incredibly dangerous when AJ DeBonsa and Rob Wright move the ball because they will get it back. That is Kevin Young's offense. It's pro-style offense, right? So the ball's going to move. If you pass it, you're going to get it back most of the time. So this men's basketball team is for real. I was worried about this Wisconsin game because it was a revenge game for the Badgers, but BYU really took it to them. The game was hardly ever in question. Wisconsin did go on a run to get within 7 in the second half when AJ DeBonsa was in foul trouble, but BYU just battled back. Everybody on the team upped their level when DeBonsa had to go out. So, yeah, I'm very excited about this team. They're going to be very good, but the Big 12 is a grinder. Texas Tech, Arizona, Kansas, Houston. Yeah, all of those teams are ranked in the top 25 right now. Yeah, that's going to be a very tough ask. And then Baylor is always a difficult opponent. So it'll be a fun season, but it's not going to be easy. The Big 12 is probably the best basketball conference in the country. I know the ACC and the SEC don't like me saying that, but it's true. I don't think there's a deeper conference out there. I don't think any conference can trot out 6 to 7 teams and think that they have a realistic shot of beating any other conference, top to bottom, like the Big 12 can. So awesome stuff for the men's basketball team. They're going to stay in the top 10. They might even move up a little bit. Connecticut lost to Arizona, just to give everybody an idea of how tough the Big 12 is going to be, and that's kind of where we're at. So kudos to Kevin Young and company. Keep it rolling. You're fun to watch, like truly. All right, let's move this on to the Utah State game. Let's go with the late game first. And at halftime, I thought the Aggies' goose was cooked. I thought they were done. Fresno State seems like a very solid defensive team most of the time. They caused a couple of turnovers from Utah State. And I just thought, well, Utah State doesn't run the ball very well. Bryson Barnes is throwing like 50% completion percentage here. But they kicked in a couple of trick plays with Anthony Garcia. Bryson Barnes decided he was a running back instead of a quarterback this game. He carried the ball 23 times for 113 yards. And Javen Jacobs is supplanting Miles Davis as the best running back on the roster. Braden, Pegan and Brady Boyd are really showing up and showing out for the team. And they won. Utah State is bowl eligible. I did not think that was possible. If you remember in my preview, I thought it was going to be 5 wins for the Aggies at best. Utah State's bowl eligible in the first year of Bronco Mendenhall. So that's pretty darn good. You got the Bronco Mendenhall experience against UNLV for certain. But against Fresno State, Utah State showed me some stuff, especially on defense. John Miller is still a force, but Tyree Morris and Bronson Olivau Jr. also showed up, got a couple of key sacks in the game. So Utah State is bowl eligible going into this final game against Boise. When it comes to the standings in the Mountain West, it's not as bunched up as the Big 12, but it is kind of interesting. So Utah State is not out of this by any stretch of the imagination either. Right now, as it stands, San Diego State is basically a lock. So that's one of the two going into the Mountain West Conference Championship game. Other than that, you got Boise State, New Mexico, UNLV, all with 2 losses, and then Fresno State, Hawaii, and Utah State with 3. That's half the conference still alive going into the final week. Now, am I saying Utah State has a chance against Boise State? Not really. But that's what I thought against Fresno. So this Utah State team has been surprising me pretty much all season, which has been nice to see. I don't know what they're going to do next year because Bryson Barnes will have exhausted his eligibility. So we'll have to see what Bronco Mendenhall has up his sleeve if the new administration decides to keep him. I don't know. That is definitely a storyline worth tracking. And we're going into the final stretch of the season with meaningful football up in Logan. It is a home game for the Aggies, so don't forget about that. Hopefully the Maverick Stadium will be jumping. Hopefully a lot of Aggies fans will be there as opposed to Broncos fans, because in the past couple of times Boise State has traveled to Utah State, it has been Boise Blue pretty much a lot. So hopefully the Aggies could kind of box them out a little bit and get a little home cooking. It is an afternoon kickoff, 2 p.m. on CBS. Not CBS Sports, CBS. So national game or regional game, I guess, because it is CBS, but a regional game for Utah State. They could do something here. Now, the percentages, if you want to get into those, I don't really want to because that's depressing. I'm just saying Utah State has a chance of making the Mountain West Conference Championship game. They do. Pretty wild, right? In a year where I thought they weren't going to do anything, they have taken advantage of a couple of teams that are really bad this year. Nevada, Air Force, San Jose State, UTEP. Those are their wins, but then they beat Fresno State, which has a winning record. So, I don't know, man. This team is impossible to gauge, and that kind of makes it more fun. It really does. You don't know what Aggie team you're going to get week over week, but congratulations to the Aggies, surpassing everybody's expectations in getting to a bowl game. And, hey, shock the world to get to the Mountain West Conference Championship game, huh? How about you do that? That'd be really cool. Moving right along, we'll go to the evening game, I guess you could say. Well, not really. The other afternoon game. Utah against Kansas State. And Utah fans have been hearing it during the game, after the game, and all throughout the week. I am sure nobody expected this to happen, not even myself. I thought Kansas State was done. I thought they had no fight left in them. Their first-string running back decided to transfer a couple weeks ago. Their top wide receiver is done for the year with injury. Their top linebacker was injured and out for the game. And then in the first half, their best pass rusher was ejected. All signs, if you just stopped there, pointed to Kansas State getting blown out. And also, Kansas State has one of the worst rushing offenses in the Big 12, if not the nation. Well, that's why we play the games, right? This game was fun for a neutral observer such as myself. I wanted something to talk about with this game other than just another Utah blowout, because that's boring to talk about. This game was back and forth. It was up and down, and it had nothing to do with the passing games mostly. Devin Dampier hit a couple of long passes, but overall, I'll be honest with you, he looked like the Devin Dampier that I thought Utah was going to get all season. Missing the easy throws, turning the ball over with that fumble that I thought lost them the game, and just seemingly ineffective when he dropped back to pass. Almost like you couldn't really bank on him hitting anybody. And if I were to tell Utah fans that Ryan Davis went the entire game without a catch, he only had a couple of targets, I would think Utah fans would probably a rough night, and it was. 51-47, Utah pulls out the victory. The pick 2, as it will be known as, I guess, really turned the game on its head. Everybody, including myself, thought there was a pass interference on that play. When I saw the replay, I was like, no, that's not pass interference. But live, I thought it was. The ball gets, plucked into the air and then falls into the arms of Teo Johnson. He takes it back 100 and some odd yards for 2 points. And that got Rice-Eccles jumping again, and that's all the Utes really needed to have belief. And then Spencer Fano goes down, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And John Henry Daly went down with a non-contact injury, which broke my heart. The season he was having was an All-American season. And it was an award-winning season for that kid. and he was just out in pass coverage. He turned, and the turf monster ate up his leg. Non-contact injuries in sports are the worst. Always the worst. You always expect the worst. You hope for the best. But when those happen, it's not good. So, this game, Nate Johnson made a cameo, had some huge plays to get momentum for the Utes in the second half. Devin Dampier forgot that his ankle was hurting during the fourth quarter, and he turned into the Devin Dampier of the first 3 games of the season. Bird Ficklin was just doing bird things, just getting into the end zone. And my goodness, this game. And who else? To seal it off, who else could it have been? You couldn't even have written a script better. Lander Barton gets the interception to seal the game. I mean, come on. It's just perfect, right? It's poetic. It's Hollywood. It's just perfect. Utah gets the win, 51-47. They're very slim hopes of a Big 12 championship game appearance as well as a college football playoff appearance stay alive, barely. We'll have to see what happens on Tuesday, but neither BYU nor Utah will get any respect in those polls. I doubt they'll move at all. If anything, they might drop, just because that's how the committee views the Big 12. And Mark Harlan being in that room, he can't really voice his opinion on these two teams. That's what happens in that room, is you got representatives from pretty much every conference. You have neutral observers. And once your conference comes up, you can't really speak. You say, this is the team. This is their record. This is the record of their opponents. This is how they've performed. And then you let everybody else discuss. That's what happens in that room. So Mark Harlan being able to stump for BYU and Utah and Texas Tech isn't really a thing he can do. He could try, but he's not going to be able to really say much in that room. I think he could do a better job of needling the SEC, needling the Big Ten about how they're 2 teams, and that's it for the entire conference. The rest of their conferences are not as good as they pretend they are. If you look at the Athletic did a great article about the work BYU still needs to do and how the team itself just doesn't care what the committee has to say. If you win out, you go to the playoff, That's their attitude, and that's the right attitude to have. Kudos to Kalani Sitake and his coaching staff, his training staff, his media staff, all being able to send that message to the team. Our destiny is in our hands. We win these last 2 games, we're in. And that's the attitude they have. But the Athletics said, and they also showed with tangible evidence, that BYU's case to be in the top 10 is as good or better than Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss. Yeah, that's real. So Utah and BYU should be in the playoff. But what do I know, right? I'm just from what was it that Bryant Gumbel said about BYU in the 90s from Podunk University, I think is what he called all the schools out here in the West other than USC. That's pretty much what he called everyone out here. It was Podunk University. So I guess that's how they still view things back east. But this game was so much fun to watch as a neutral observer. It was back and forth. And I'm going to nerd out here, if you'll allow me. I'm going to nerd out here to kind of explain what was happening to Morgan Scalley's defense. So what Morgan Scalley's defense is predicated on is reacting to the formation of the offense. So in college, usually the offense gets into formation with around 25 to 20 seconds left on the play clock. And then when they get into formation, they wait for the defense to declare. So they see what the defense is doing. Then they look to the sideline. They get either a new play call or say, hey, this play call we had originally is good. And then they get ready to go. Kansas State threw that on its head because Utah and Morgan Scalley does the opposite. They wait for the offense to show. And then they kind of show what they're going to do. And then the offense looks to the sideline. They get ready to go. There's about 13 seconds left in the play clock. And then the defense looks to Morgan Scalley for the call. And then Utah's defense reacts and reads what the offense is doing, often better than what the offense is trying to execute. So that's usually what happens and why Morgan Scalley's defenses are so good. What Kansas State did, and they did it brilliantly, was they would wait to break the huddle until there was about, I think the highest play clock I saw was about 20 seconds. And when they did that, they would break the huddle. The receivers would go out first. Maybe the running back would get into position. But the offensive line would wait, and the tight ends would wait for another 2 to 3 seconds. And then they would rush to the line. There would be no adjustments made by Avery Johnson, the quarterback for Kansas State, and they would just snap the ball. That meant Utah was rushing around trying to get to their position, to get to their play call, and then as soon as the ball was snapped, Utah wasn't really in position. I thought that was brilliant from Matt Wells and the Kansas State offense. It's something that I never thought of, and it's something that's very interesting. It was a chink in the armor of Morgan Scalley. Now, Morgan Scalley pretty much figured it out late in the fourth quarter, and he's just like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to do it. I'm not going to react to what you have. My defense is better than your offense. I'm going to make the call, and my guys are going to execute. That's what happened on those last couple of drives for Utah. So Morgan Scalley did figure it out. But during this game, in this microcosm of a game, my nerding out right there, I was blown away by what Kansas State was doing on offense. It was so impressive to me that they did it, and they did it on the road. Doing it at home is pretty much easy, right? Because there's no crowd noise. You're just able to do that. You could go down to 5 seconds on the play clock, line up, snap the ball, and go before the play clock runs out. On the road, I was impressed. I really was. So that's why Utah had trouble against this particular team on this particular day. I don't think it's going to happen again because Morgan Scalley is just that good of a coach. But this one time was so cool for a football nerd like me to see. Because when Kansas State lined up finally with like 11 or 10 seconds left on the play clock, Utah's linebackers and safeties were still sprinting around or, getting it out of each other's way to get into the right spot on the field. By the time they felt like they were in the right spot, the ball had already been snapped. And that was so cool. The chess match. This is the stuff that I love about sports. I love the front office stuff in professional sports. And then in sports in general, it's the chess match. And I really enjoyed that. So Nerd Out is done. I apologize for going into the weeds on that one, but it's just something that I saw that they weren't really talking about on the broadcast. They mentioned it once or twice, Brock Osweiler did, but they weren't, I guess, either able to go into it in more detail or just unwilling to, and it's something that I wanted to talk about. So I thought it was brilliant. I thought Kansas State did a wonderful job, and Utah pulls out the victory with late-game heroics from their star players. That's why they're star players, right? All right, let's move it on. Speaking of star players, LJ Martin, have a night. The man is a beast. He's a man. He's a beast. 6'2", according to Robert Griffin III, 235, 240 at running back. Bear Bachmeier had an awful night. He did. He couldn't throw the ball anywhere. LJ Martin just took over the game. The offensive line and LJ Martin just went, all right, fine. That's why we're a team. We're going to step up. 32 carries, 222 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 catches for 44 yards. His average per rush was almost 7 yards. It was 6.9, and his average per reception was 14.7. That's usually a wide receiver's type numbers. Parker Kingston and JoJo Phillips didn't do Bear Bachmeier any favors by dropping a couple of passes, and Carson Ryan also dropped a pass in there as well. Chase Roberts went out with an injury which shook the confidence of Bear Bachmeier a little bit. It also altered the play calling massively from Aaron Roderick. Hopefully the injury isn't too serious and Chase Roberts can make it back. If not, for the Central Florida game, definitely for the Big 12 championship game. But my goodness, LJ Martin just showed up and showed out. Leading rusher in the Big 12 by far. He was just a beast. I mean, there's nothing more I can say. The offensive line did a fantastic job against Cincinnati. Cincinnati rarely blitzes. And against a run team like BYU, you need to blitz. You need to fill those gaps. And Cincinnati just never did. So LJ Martin just feasted. He feasted in this game. And I am so glad that Aaron Roderick and Kalani Sitake and Harvey Unga, the running backs coach, noticed that. And they just said, yeah, give it to LJ. Just give it to LJ and we win. So Bear Bachmeier was able to have another freshman game. He was, because the rest of the team was just that much better. The defense, Brendan Sorsby of Cincinnati is a very talented and gifted quarterback. What gets him into trouble is his emotions. I don't know if you noticed that during the game, but the second things started to go sideways for Cincinnati, his emotions were all over the place. He needs to get that under control. Because that throws the rest of your team off. Because the rest of your team sees the quarterback throwing a temper tantrum and, foaming at the mouth during a substitution thing where they had to call a timeout. And it's just like, dude, people make mistakes. You've got to weather it. And he just couldn't. And then at the end of the game, they couldn't get the snap off. He throws another temper tantrum by throwing the ball into the turf. You got to grow up. You are immensely talented. You are one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the Big 12. Just from sheer talent and able to spin the ball, getting the ball to where it needs to go. But his attitude these past 3 games for Cincinnati has been just terrible. So that's another thing. In the defense, every defense knows that. After that performance against Utah, Morgan Scalley got him to be very angry, throw many temper tantrums. The other defenses took note, and went, yeah, we could do that too. Maybe not as well as Utah did, but BYU did it pretty darn well. Terrian Alexander, my goodness, have yourself an evening. He almost got a pick six. Actually, no, that was Evan Johnson, so my apologies. But Terrian Alexander had a sack in the final 2 minutes of the game when the game was out of reach for Cincinnati. And I love that Jay Hill doesn't take his foot off the gas. As opposed to, I'm not going to name the past defensive coordinators, but Eli Usatuiaki, Bronco Mendenhall. They usually would take their foot off the gas going to prevent defense, and as my grandpa loved to say when I was younger, the only thing the prevent defense does is prevent you from winning. So I'm very glad to see that Jay Hill doesn't fall into that trap. BYU moves to 10-1 on the season. They have now blown completely past my preseason expectation. Same with Utah at 9 wins. So BYU wins this one 26-14 on the road in a game where they were only favored by 2.5 points. And pretty much across the board, whether it was Big Noon Kickoff, ESPN's College Game Day, it was 50-50 on the picks that BYU was going to win. BYU fans, we're just going to have to accept the fact that BYU is never going to get any respect because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. None of these players are going to be drafted in the first round. None of them. Not a single one on this roster. And that angers national outlets because they can't just point to a superstar and go, that's why this team's winning. There is no, I can't even think of a player right now off the top of my head, but oh my goodness. Oh, I'm really blanking here. That's embarrassing. There is no Jeremiah Smith, there we go, of Ohio State. There on this BYU roster. There isn't. There is no Jeremiah Love. There we go. That one's easy. On this roster. Although LJ Martin did his best Jeremiah Love impersonation in this game. So that's just the reality. National outlets hate it when there's no superstar. Bear Bachmeier, that's why they keep talking about the true freshman, right? And yes, this true freshman is having a true freshman season that nobody saw coming and rarely happens in college football. I would suggest you look at Nico Iamaleava. He had a pretty good freshman season himself, but that's beside the point. That's why national outlets don't give respect to teams like BYU or even Utah. Utah has that offensive line, right? Talking about an offensive lineman going in the first round isn't sexy. That's not going to get you clicks. It's not going to get you views. It's not going to get you people watching your, first take television show that I absolutely hate. I hate that show. And so when we look at BYU and Utah, they're just not going to get that respect. The coaches are the superstars on these teams, and there's no players for these national writers or pundits to point to going, yeah, that's why they won. And so they're never going to give them respect because it's lazy. And there's nothing more that these national outlets, national writers, national pundits love than an easy take. Just look at Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee. They love an easy take. And it's not enjoyable watching or listening either. All right, so that does it for the program this week. Happy Thanksgiving to you, one and all. No matter what happens in the rankings on Tuesday, do not let that foreshadow your Thanksgiving festivities, wherever and however you celebrate them. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.